think of the media in this country, the problem is that they have a sense of self-righteousness, a double standard on issue after issue after issue. They can find everything wrong with somebody else, but they will not look inside and ever admit that they could be wrong themselves. I didn't get a chance to make a farewell address, but when I get old enough and decide to retire, and I'm not planning it at the moment, but when I get that old, if I make a farewell address, I think I would warn against the media elitist complex. You know, the media is always talking about the imperial presidency, the power of the imperial presidency. I think we ought to hear a little bit of discussion of the imperial media and its power. You see, presidential power is limited by the courts, limited by the Congress. The media's power is unlimited.
What would he know about it? Joining me now, Auron MacIntyre obviously has a great show. More importantly, he has a book called The Total State. I'm already geeking out on it. The Total State, you need to go buy it, pre-order it, whatever you can do, get it in your friggin' hands. Auron, what would Richard Nixon know about a media-run country? Pfft.
Yeah, obviously Nixon was the first president to truly understand the force of this. He famously lost to JFK because of the introduction of the media and the way that television played a role in presidential elections. And then even though he was a very popular president who had been reelected and was making great strides when it came to things like bringing law and order to the United States, he was pushed out by a media complex that obviously did not want him there. They did not want him challenging their authority.
Auron, can you explain for people Watergate? Like, everyone thinks about Watergate, and really everyone knows, a couple high points on it. Nixon was president, he got removed, there was a huge scandal, we did something dirty. There's a lot more to that story, isn't there?
Yes, again, it's very clear that the media and most importantly entrenched bureaucrats across many different agencies were not big fans of what Richard Nixon wanted to do, the way that he wanted to bring the country back to its roots in certain ways. And so they made sure to work against him. The media is able to constantly hammer people with particular ideas. And so they were able to bring this idea that Nixon had engaged in significant improprieties, the kinds of thing that today, compared to what the Obama White House is now confirmed as doing, the Biden administration are confirmed as doing, would pale in comparison. We now have presidents who have constantly kept their political opponents under surveillance using the intelligence agency. They've leveraged this against their political opponents. This is now common practice in the United States, but this is something that actually forced Nixon to leave the White House. And the only difference between these two is that Nixon did not have the media on his side, and Barack Obama and Joe Biden do.
I remember it like it was yesterday when I first saw this journalist standing in front of a burning building calling Black Lives Matter protests mostly peaceful. Here it was.
I want to be clear in how I characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It is not, generally speaking, unruly.
Auron, you mentioned they were angry about Richard Nixon cracking down on crime. Why does the American media, why does the American journalists, New York Times, MSNBC, pick them? Why do they love violent street crime so much?
Because this is part of the revolution. These are the foot soldiers of power. You have to understand that we might see these protests and say, oh, they think they're standing up to power. They think they're standing up to the man. But absolutely not. The reason that these protests are facilitated not only by the government, where we have people like Kamala Harris explicitly paying for the bail of people who are violently violating our laws, but they're also given this amazing cover by the media, is that these protests are aligned with the regime. The regime extends far beyond the government. It extends into many of our key institutions, including the universities and most especially the media. We are primarily a media-run state. They are the priestly caste that disseminate these communist revolutionary ideas into every aspect of our lives. And so they want to make sure that this disorder continues because it allows them to wield it as a terrifying sledgehammer against any people who resist the current revolution.
Auron, the media is doing something else, obviously with the aid of everyone from Joe Biden on down. They're now not talking about just Donald Trump. They're talking about Trump and his supporters as being a threat to democracy. Here it is.
wants to take your health care away. Donald Trump wants to end democracy.
People really know the danger of Donald Trump. They know that he's a threat to the institutions of the American democracy.
American democracy could end with the election of Donald Trump.
I mean, the man has he's declared open season on democracy.
Fundamentally, a second Trump term could mean the end of American democracy as we know it.
Auron, what kills me about those montages is not that there are a bunch of dirty, evil communists who are trying to get people hurt. It's how on message they always are at all times. All of them, top to bottom, from CNN to the president himself to the street communists, all use the same language at all times. It is wild to watch.
Yeah, especially when many people would find that language to be so contradictory, right? The election of Trump would be the end of democracy. How can you get so many people who are supposed to be intelligent, supposed to be wise, supposed to be educated, to say something so ridiculous simultaneously? And the answer is that the nonsense actually serves as a uniform. That by going ahead and saying these kind of clown world phrases like elections are bad for democracy, they can go ahead and show that each one of them are on board with the current regime morality. They're all signaling their shared values, their shared system of kind of elite interpersonal connection when it comes to how the country should be run. And the worst thing they can imagine is that the middle class, the people who are outside, who are out of touch, who are not connected to that value system, would actually get to share their voice, would actually speak on who would run the country. And so they need to make it very clear that it's the ruling class's job, the media's job, to inform these people what they should believe. And if they won't believe it, if they're going to go ahead and elect somebody like Donald Trump, they're a real threat to the ruling class, and they need to be categorized as such.
Auron, liberal Aunt Peggy, she reads the New York Times, she watches CNN. She lives in a world that is not real. Like she just does. She lives in a world entirely of make-believe. Can she be saved? Can she be pulled out of that world? So many of these people just seem beyond salvage. They've lived in a world that's not real because of the media for so long that they're unsalvageable.
A lot of times we conservatives have a problem because we think that we're going to win enough arguments. We're going to bring enough reason and logic, and eventually people will just wake up. They'll wake up to the ridiculous nature of the things that they've been told. But what we forget is that politics is not primarily about arguments. It's not about facts and logic and reason, no matter what we'd like to put in our catchphrases. The truth is that politics is about status, it's about identity, it's about values and understandings. And people tend to vote the direction, they tend to lean in the direction that they think will acquire them status and power. Your liberal Aunt Peggy is reading the New York Times because she thinks that's what smart people do. That's what powerful people do. That's how you climb the social ladder. You go to college, you get a job in a Fortune 500 company, you read the right media, you watch the right television shows, you spout the right bromides back to people who are in the regime. And so it's very difficult to break through that. You can bring all the facts and logic you want, but as long as there is more social status in being a New York Times reader than being a Trump supporter, that's what people are going to do in a lot of cases.